right, so experimenting with Agile, my results. So what I'll be doing today is basically telling you several stories of experiments I ran. I ran them on a product that I was working on the side. That way I could just basically do what I want, see how it goes, you know. So there's several parts to it. One is, product ideation and soliciting feedback story. The lessons I learned from that and the results, and several practices, agile practices I experimented with. And then also did some more coding and working closely with stakeholder, pivoting on feedback, and experimented with some practices there. And then my first release with this product and experimenting with some practices with that as well. So the first story I get into is product ideation and soliciting feedback. So the story of this product starts with my family. So this is my beautiful wife, Becky, and my 3 kids, Caleb, Grace, and Matthew. And I really love coming home to these guys every day. They're a blast, a lot of fun. And as I said, I work at Hunter Industries, where mob programming has been born. And if you're more interested in mob programming, I'll be doing a session later today, kind of sharing my learning there and how that's been going. But it's basically multiple people working on the same computer at the same time, highly collaborative way to write software. Sometimes the product owners will come and mob with us or work closely with us and stakeholders. And so sometimes my worlds collide. So here are my kids. A friend of mine gave me an iPad game to do kind of like kids coding or whatever. And since there was only one, they started working together, and I'm kind of like, hey, they're almost pairing or mobbing here, you know what I mean? It's like, maybe I'll coach them, and I started to maybe navigate this way. My daughter's like, get out of here. You only coach people at work, let us program. And ever since I started experimenting with Agiles, I've come to love Post-its. I'm always carrying around, even in my personal life, so I'm weird like that. But they've noticed, and my son will put Post-its around everywhere and say, like, I'm doing what Daddy does, so it's been fun to see the worlds collide. In my career, I started, in IT at the San Diego Nuclear Power Plant, and this kind of starts the birth of this kind of product idea I had. And so it was fun to work there. Supported the control room software, security software, and radiation protection software. Really interesting place to work, to work at a nuclear facility. But unfortunately, they started to get, yes, sir.
What's the level of acceptable defects in that environment?
Yeah, to add a column to a database took a signature from the President of the United States, so it was, no. Wasn't that bad, wasn't that heavy, but it was...
Very good, we're safe then.
Yeah, but if you didn't hear the news, it got shut down by the government. So, but one cool thing that came out of that was they were offering voluntary severance packages. And so if you left by a certain time, and I was able to get that. It was great. It helped fund the minivan for me and my wife and kids, so that was awesome. And I landed this job at Norton Syntech, which is also an awesome place to work and really interesting. I grew into kind of an Agile coach, Scrum Master role there, but it was basically from scratch Agile transformation, so it was a really interesting experience. But kind of where this product idea came out of was part of the voluntary severance package at San Onofre was $10,000 of free education you can spend on anything you want. And I'm like, all right. So I'm a little bit of a philosophy nerd, and so I'm like, well, I'll try out doing a master's in philosophy and see what happens. It doesn't have to be work related. So I got about 30 units in at this university, Southern Evangelical Seminary, and the money ran out. You know what I mean? And I really wanted to finish the degree. I tried applying for scholarships, but committees don't really want to give money to someone who's got a full-time job, a mortgage, and kids and all that. But while I was doing the logic course there, which I love, by the way, I had this idea. I'm like, wow, we're doing a lot of things on pen and paper. Wouldn't it be great if there's some software to help us do the logic learning and tutorials and working on our papers and things like that? And so I had this idea, and I had this, wow, what if I could meet with the president and convince them to barter, for free classes? I could finish my university if I make this product, And so that was the dream. And so with this kind of vision in mind, I said, all right, what Agile, at the time I was learning about Agile, what Agile things can I experiment with to see how they go when I try this out? So one is, if you've seen Agile manifesto, the first value is individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So I really wanted to embrace that. I'm like, okay, I have some time, I'm gonna work on the side, how can I really embrace this in the kind of ideation and kind of forming what the product's gonna be? So one of the kind of specific practices was I demoed for feedback as often as I could. If I only had an idea, I would demo the idea in slides. If I had some code up and working, I would demo whatever I got and just get as much feedback as I can from people. as much as I can throughout the whole process. Another practice was minimum viable product. So as you can see up here in the diagram, there's a way to build something in a minimum viable way, and there's a way not to. So the top way is, hey, we're going to build a car, and the first thing we're going to make is a tire, which no people can use. Next thing we'll build is like a frame and some tires, which no one can use. And then so the thing that's actually usable is not available to the very, very end. Where a minimum viable product kind of way is, let's first make a skateboard and then transform that into a bike and then do a motorcycle into a car. And that sounds kind of ridiculous with physical examples, but in code you can actually work in that kind of way. So I wanted to think like, okay, I have all these ideas, how do I refine it down to that first implementable thing, the skateboard, that'll give some value to somebody, and then I can build on that as I go. So that was one thing I wanted to try. So minimum, meaning minimal effort, and then viable, so the market will actually use it and like it. Another thing I was learning a lot about was user stories, so I got a lot of training from Mike Cohn, if you guys have heard of him, and so user stories, I'll show you some a little bit for this product I was working on, but it has 3 C's, a card, a conversation, and a confirmation. So that conversation goes back to Agile manifesto of just having a lot of interaction with individuals and getting that feedback. So I really wanted to try that out. So with those things in mind, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna experiment with these practices and I'll try it on this product, right? In this kind of ideation stage. So what I'm about to show you is like the vision I showed to a lot of stakeholders and people to get feedback on. So I said, hey, spell checkers are useful. I need them all the time. I have terrible spelling. It'll point out that I'm misspelling this word processor here. How great would it be if computers and software could do the same thing for logic and kind of help you out as you're working on stuff? So I didn't misspell isn't here, but I made a logical error. I'm contradicting myself. And so the way to be able to scan text in that kind of way and give that kind of feedback, not only finding errors, but also helping you finish what your thought and finish what you're thinking. So you start typing the last sentence and it'll give you suggestions on like, hey, is useful follows from what you were saying before. So that was kind of the big grand vision, right? And so then I started working on user stories. So it's like, okay, big picture feature is content creation. This could be useful for creating content. So, if you've seen user stories before, it's like, as a type of person, I want something so that I can get some kind of value or result, right? So, big grand in the sky idea. Hey, as a New York Times journalist, I want to make sure my article makes sense. So as I'm writing my article, I want to get logical feedback so that we can maintain a good reputation for not making fallacious, articles or that kind of thing. So a little bit more smaller scale, maybe more reasonable to obtain was, as a student, I want my thesis and main points to be logical for an essay I'm writing so that I can get a good grade in this class and do a good job. And so I was trying to fit this idea into different user roles and things to do and different value. And then I wrote user stories for content consumption, kind of big ideas on analyzing content so people can help choose what resources to use in a paper or even a news article. So I wrote user stories there. Experimented with user stories on analysis of lots of content. So, organizations have teams of writers and ways that they can keep all their writing in sync and not contradict each other. And so what I did was I tried out this practice. Anyone who would meet up with me who was relevant in this kind of industry I'd meet up with. So I met, me and my wife went to an education conference for another reason, but while I was there I met up with people who teach logic, people who write books, people working in education and logic. I met with several of my university professors about it. I met with several colleagues, developers, UI engineers, Scrum Masters, other things like that, people in organizations who might potentially use it, and I just demoed whatever I had. Here's my idea, here's the software I got up and working. I just wanted that feedback. And so the result I wanted to share with that is, so let me give one caveat first, is it's really hard to recommend anything. Software world, and especially a lot of business stuff, is every context is really different, right? So what I'm doing today is sharing, not necessarily recommending. So I've had a lot of success with these practices in this product and also working at a company. But what I wanted to share was all this feedback really helped. I had all these ideas, all these things to do, really helped narrow it down, be like, okay, I'm starting to see what people would be interested in, what they would like, what they wouldn't like, what user stories struck with them more, what features when I showed them kind of lit them up. And it really helped me refine it down to my first MVP, the first thing I was going to try out to make usable for the minimum viable product. So the thing I decided was, hey, my university seems pretty interested in this app, or at least some people in it. So I picked the user story as a student. I want to analyze my thesis and main points for a paper, and then I can get that logical feedback on it and make that better before I go write the big paper. The lesson learned for me, the result was interacting with people as much as you can really, really helps. And I've seen this at, working at various companies too, that the tighter and tighter feedback loops can be really, really help. So at Hunter, I know Chris Lucian has talked about the mobs that have the most interactions with the product owner usually have the most success, you know what I mean? And so, in this example, it's just whoever would be interested in it. At work, it was, every time we have something demonstratable, after a couple days of coding, call over the product owner, let's show them and make sure we're on the right path. Just be constantly getting that feedback. So that was the one thing I wanted to share. And again, this is nothing new under the sun here. This comes right out of the Agile manifesto. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. The next part of the story was coding and pivoting on feedback story. So it has to do with feedback and actually getting into the development aspect of it. So one of the practices is thin vertical slices. So I had this feature, I want to go do it. So how do I go make it? So some ways people write software is that they'll go make the whole entire bottom layer, right, of the cake. My app didn't have a database and a web server, but just assume it did. And instead of, so for I have all these, sub stories I want to go do, I'm going to go make all the database schema for all of that. No one can use it, you know what I mean? But I'm just going to get the whole bottom layer working first. That would be like the opposite of doing a thin vertical slice. And so you want every feature or user story you do to be usable so you get that feedback. So I was learning about this practice. I'm like, I'm going to experiment and try with this. I'm going to try to make everything I do as much as I can a thin slice through the app. So in analyzing someone's main points, there's various kinds of arguments you can make. I would pick one kind and like, okay, I can analyze this kind, and then I can analyze this next kind. So I experimented with that. Yet again, easier because I'm just doing it by myself. But and also one thing that will help with this, a lot of the technical practices of Agile really help. A lot of the things that Scrum and the management practices try to do are really, really hard if you're not doing the Agile technical practices. If you're doing the Agile technical practices, doing thin vertical slices is trivial. If you're not, it can be really, really hard. And so I think that's kind of what the next slides will be about that really help with that. And one of those is test-driven development. So if you're not familiar, alongside the product code, you also write this code called test code. And it's basically an automated test. And you write code in such a way where you go through this cycle. So the first stage is, before I write product code, something that the user is actually going to use, I write some test code. And all it says is, hey, I'm going to instantiate some code, and I'm going to call it to do something, and I'm going to expect a certain result. Square a number, I put in 2, 4 comes out, kind of thing. That's going to fail because the product code doesn't even exist yet. And then I write just enough product code to make that pass. And then once that's passing and working, we have the product that works, but it's not clean, the code's not maintainable. So while keeping the test passing, you then clean up the code. You can do things from like Uncle Bob Martin's book, the Clean Code book, and refactoring design patterns and things like that to make the code readable, maintainable, understandable. And so I've been learning a lot about this. I tried it out in some training, but I'm like, on this project, I just want to go all out and see what it feels like. And so I tried out test-driven development. Something that comes along with doing test-driven development is you start building this suite of tests. Because every line of product code you write, you first have to write a test code. So what that means in the end is every behavior in the product is automatically tested if you follow the test-driven development process. So what starts happening is you start building up this pyramid of tests, at least in one way of doing it. And so I heard about this test automation pyramid, and I'm like, I want to strive for that and see what that's like on a product. And so I'll quickly describe it. Yes, sir? Someone speaking? Or is that someone else? Sorry. So at the bottom of the pyramid are these things called fast tests. There's various ways to draw the pyramid and name it, but this is one way. And essentially, this is the primary thing you do when you're doing test-driven development. So I instantiate a set of objects. It's not talking to a interface where you click buttons or talking to the database and things like that. And I write little tests to make sure each of those things works well, and I do that as I go. And to me, this is the foundation of a test automation suite because they run lightning fast. So I could change code and run this bottom suite of tests in like 2 or 3 seconds and know I didn't break any other feature or anything else I added from the beginning of the project. And then the next layer after that is, slower tests, but still pretty quick. And these tests instantiate a ton of objects or walk through a whole user scenario. So if user scenario was, doing a logic tutorial, it would walk through each step of the tutorial, right? Where the test at the bottom layer might only do one step at a time, kind of thing. And it would likely cut off, like it wouldn't be clicking through the app kind of thing. And it might use the database, the hard drive system, or things like that. But it's still pretty fast. So I could run that suite of tests, and the numbers you see up here are what I have today. When I started out, they weren't this many. It was little, but it kind of followed the same shape as I went along. And at the very top is probably what you most often hear about in test automation, because it seems to be all the rage when people talk about test automation. And these are end-to-end kind of GUI clicking kind of tests, And so the reason you want them small on the test pyramid, at least what I was going to try out, was that they tell you a lot. If these tests pass, the app started up, the user was able to click through it and enter some things and expect some things to come out, and the app closed down, everything went successful. It tells you a lot, but they're really slow, right? The other tests run lightning fast. This one actually fires up the app and walks through it step by step. And so they're slow, and they can also be flaky. They pass sometimes, fail sometimes, pass sometimes, fail sometimes. And so the ideology I was trying out was to keep not too many of those. You want some of them so that your whole app glues together and everything works. So as I was working, every time I added a feature or changed something, I could run just the bottom suite if I wanted quick results. If I was going to go get a coffee, I'd run them all, and then when I come back, I would know if I broke anything or not. So I wanted to try out that methodology. Another coding practice I tried out was the solid principles. And I'll walk through each one really briefly. We can talk more about it after. There's a lot to them. But basically, when you're writing code, you want to follow each of these principles. The first one is single responsibility principle. You want each class or module to be about one thing. So an example would be when developers make code, you don't want them to put it all in one file and all in one module, the logic for the report and also the formatting of the report all in the same spot. Because what happens when you do that is you change the formatting and then the logic of the report breaks. You know what I mean? Everything's kind of wound up, tied together. O is the open close principle, and this is where you want to make your code in such a way that it invites people to extend the code as opposed to modifying it. So you write the code in such a way that people aren't reaching in and changing code, which is risking of breaking that code, is that you add new modules and rearrange them in certain ways that it adds new behavior. Liskov substitution principle is kind of I read it as like a principle in object-oriented programming where you do inheritance properly. Interface segregation principle. I've heard coding coach Jeremy Bites say that the solid principles all pretty much say the same thing, but they're saying it in a different way. So the interface segregation principle is basically saying your public API for your modules and your code should be slim and small, which just kind of reminds me of the single responsibility principle. Dependency inversion principle. That one might be one of my favorites, and the whole idea is that you want to depend upon abstractions, and you want the high-level policies of what your software does to be separated via abstractions between low-level details like what UI framework you're using or what kind of database or that kind of stuff. So I was learning about these principles, didn't know them well, so I'm like, I'm going to perfectly try them out on this project and see how it goes. Domain-oriented design was another thing I tried out, especially more near the end. So I wanted to keep separate the main business logic, the main code that's about what it is. So for me, it was about logic analysis and things like that. I wanted that separated from the frameworks and the things I use, like Windows, database, UI, HTTP request, Amazon, all those things. I want to keep that code separated from that. All right, so that was a lot about the Agile practices I was experimenting in. So what happened? So up here I have Dr. Huffling, and after all those people I got feedback from, he was the one guy who seemed the most interested. And so one of the sessions I had with him where I was showing him what I got, he's like, wow, yeah, this is pretty cool, but I don't really see myself using this MVP you've made. But what sounds really cool after talking with you about it is this feature B, where as I teach a logic class, and as they're doing their homework, it'd be really great is instead of doing pen and paper work, they could get, they try out an answer, and then the computer will give them feedback, like, oh, you got this part right, or you got this part wrong, try again. He said that kind of on-the-fly feedback is really cool, and I could use that in my class. I'm like, all right, great. Well, all that work, I'm gonna go switch features now. So I had a new MVP to go work on. And so using those practices I just talked about, I got something up and running, but it, didn't look exactly like this, but it looked something like this. Vicente, is this good UI? No? Why not? It works. What's wrong with it?
It does work.
This is some like old version of Windows or something like that, but basically got the app up and running, but it was very engineer-ish looking, right? And so I wasn't a UI expert. I still definitely am not. We lean pretty hard on Vicente, but I'm trying to learn more. But at the time, I knew some people who were better at it. So at the current company I was at, some guys who were more focused on the UI and user experience, I just like pulled them away for 20 minutes. I'm like, hey, look at this. What do you think? And it was just like, oh, no, this is terrible. You know what I mean? They gave me all these suggestions and ways to make it better. And so I took a bunch of those and I started working on those. And as I was working on them, my wife was sitting with me often, and I'd be like, yeah, she's good. She makes the house looks nice and everything. She does a really good job with that. She has a good eye for design. And so I would just show her, like, what do you think of this? And she'd be like, that's not so good. Try this. Or she'd be like, I've seen this somewhere else. Why don't you try this instead? And so just got as much feedback as I could while I was working on it to try to clean it up and make it better. And while the UI is probably definitely not perfect, it was much better than it first started out, getting that feedback. And so I got my first MVP up and running, kind of doing logic tutorials for this class. And as you can see, the user puts in, they have a prompt, and then they put in an answer, and it gives some textual feedback on what they got right or wrong, and it draws a picture of what they put in, and kind of breaks down their answer, and then they can try again. So to help them learn about what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong as they go. So I went and showed the product owner, yes, look, I have this thing, it works. And he said, yeah, this is great, we could definitely use this in this class. But we kind of talked about it before, and does your software run on Mac? I'm like, nope. Nope, definitely not right now. And he's like, well, most people use Windows, but we need, some of the professors and students use a Mac. I'm like, okay, let me go see what I can do. I'll get back to you, And so I went back to work and I did some research. I've never really done cross-platform stuff before, and I found this transpiler that'll take, Windows-ish code like C#, .NET, XAML, and you add this project to your solution in Visual Studio, and it'll transpile it into JavaScript, which you can run on the browsers, on the phone, pretty much anywhere. So the framework was called C# for HTML5, and it was free, so I got to try it out. And then I had the victory. So I tinkered with this for a month or so, and what you see here is the picture of the first night I got it up and running on a Mac and on a Windows. So this was a really exciting night for me. I think I was like showing my kids and stuff, and they're like, what? This doesn't look like anything amazing. I'm like, this is amazing. So the laptop on the right is the Windows one. It's the same one I have here. On the left, I didn't want to spend hundreds of dollars on a Mac, but my neighbor has Macs, and he's like, well, I got one in the closet that used to be my wife's. It may run, so I got it up and running, and it was good enough to test out and try. And I got it up and running, and as you can see here, the UI didn't work on quite as much to clean it up, but it had a lot of the same visual elements as the other one. And so I demonstrated that to my product owner, and he said, great, we're on board, we'll use it in the fall. And, so let's plan on using it in the fall. So one thing I learned from all this, so that was kind of the experiment, the story, and now the results of this experiment, again, was interacting with individuals early and often. Whether it's technical, whether it's UI, UX, just again, getting as many feedback loops going as you can was really helpful for me. And one Agile principle I came to really see was responding to change over following a plan, right? I had all these visions, I had my first MVP, I started showing it to everybody, and it's like, oh, now we're going this way, and then, oh, got that working, now we're going this way. And I don't know about you guys, but that's always been in my experience in software. On this pet project, or at the nuclear power plant, or Hunter, or anywhere else, is stakeholders, product owners usually have a vision, but things change dramatically over time. And so the Agile principle of making your process and your code be done in such a way that you can shift and adapt with the market. So one thing I learned too was about technical excellence and craftsmanship and trying out these practices. So I talked about solid, and the experiment was I'm going to try it and see how it goes. So in the end, I found solid to be very, very useful. So I say here, solid to the rescue, reusable objects. So you can see up there, so I started working on feature A, and I started making these objects, things in logic, argument, worldview, logic analysis engine, Euler diagram view model, that's the thing that drew the pictures of the logic. And then when I had to switch, well, I'm no longer doing feature A, now I got to switch to feature B. What was nice was that since Solid kind of helps you make all these small components that are focused on one thing, I could reuse those components on another feature. The other feature still had proposition, logic analysis, and these kind of things, but it was just a different direction. So I could just reuse those components in a different feature. So that was really, really nice. And this again ties back to the thin vertical slices you were asking about before, is that when you code in this kind of way, it makes thin vertical slices much easier to do because everything's small and narrow, and it makes it much easier to do that. One of the principles in the Agile manifesto that I came to appreciate was simplicity. The art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. It used to be kind of a confusing thing, right? Shouldn't we be trying to get work done? But the idea that I came to like about the thin vertical slices was, if I would have done the entire bottom layer for feature A, and then started doing the top layer, I would have found out, well, I don't need all that bottom layer, because I'm going to totally shift. And so I would have had all this waste of overproduction. So in Lean, one of the 7 wastes, I believe it is, overproduction. And so that's kind of what this guy's here. He's upset with all the overproduction. So the practice I tried out really helped with that. It didn't have too much overproduction. Solid to the rescue again, reusable objects, and not only feature switching, but platform switching. Since I tried to make my objects focus on one thing, they weren't tightly coupled to the environment, like Windows or Mac or file save dialog. I could reuse those components on the Mac environment. They would work in both environments. So reusable objects was great there. And one example of that is kind of the D in Solid, which is dependency inversion principle. And so on the left is kind of a picture of that, so the kind of everyday life example is, when you get a lamp, do you hardwire the lamp to the wall? No, you wouldn't do that because you're probably going to swap out lamps. But you should be doing the same thing in your code. You want to make abstractions and things in your code so that they're plug and play. You can move objects around and reuse them. And that came huge when switching from getting to work in Mac as well as Windows, is because, at first I just built like, hey, I'm going to have this abstraction about downloading files. And at the time, the only thing that implemented it was a Windows one, the file save dialog. But when it came to having to do Mac, I didn't have to rewrite a whole bunch of stuff. I just said, hey, there's this plug here where I can plug in the Mac version of doing like a Chrome file download instead. And so again, it was so beneficial to be able to swap things in and out without rewriting a bunch of things. This may be my favorite slide here. So after trying out test-driven development and the testing pyramid, wow, it gave me some serious confidence. I mean, I didn't need a whole team of manual testers. I had thousands of tests here, so to walk through each of those by hand manually would take a ton of time, right? I'm a one-man shop, but even in companies I've worked at, it's so beneficial to have an automated test suite. So I could take risks, I could run experiments. Hey, what happens if I try out doing the feature this way? Boom, run the test, oh, nothing broke, we're good. Or I'd run it and find out, oh, that breaks something, back that out, try it a different way. I could clean up the code, I could make feature experiments, and I had really high confidence I didn't break anything without even doing manual tests, just running the automated tests. So I've definitely become a believer in test-driven development after this experiment. And so that comes back again to the Agile manifesto. One of the principles is continuous attention to techno excellence and good design enhances agility. And as a Scrum Master, I used to bring people onto the team and we kind of walk through the Agile manifesto. And I used to read this one off and be like, oh yeah, do a good job when you code. Okay, moving on. But after running these experiments, I came to see like the craftsmanship practices, the solid, the test-driven development. That's really the meat where you can make your code nimble and able to adapt to the market and change quickly with high quality. So the meaning of that has really grown after running this experiment. So the slide deck almost over, and we can jump into discussion. But the first release story is we went live. The class, a small class of Logic students went live last fall at the university. And so I did some preparation, a little bit of training documentation to get them up and running, but then they just off away and started using it. And I'm very happy to say that the result was no bugs and happy students. So, so some comments from some of the students was, love the software, very intuitive, easy to use, clean and nifty, the interface is clean and simple and easy to follow. The guy in the bottom left basically said like, I was skeptical at first, but in the end, this turned out to be nice. It turned out to be great. And no bugs. So, you know, the hashtag no bugs or zero bugs movement, something we're passionate about at Hunter Industries. And I came to kind of experience that here where through following the technical practices, they didn't find any bugs. And even one of the guys was an IT guy, and you could tell he like really walked through and assessed the app. And he gave me some security feedback, ways to make it more secure, but he didn't find any bugs in it. And so that was really exciting. They found it valuable and useful. And that's kind of the end of the story part of this. But I'm going to continue supporting this app for the students and adding features to it. And it's been a really, really fun journey. And those are kind of the results of my experiments. And basically the result is trying out this, you know, the practices, values and principles in the Agile manifesto. And also, if you haven't heard of it, the manifesto for software craftsmanship. I tried it out very imperfectly, but over time I really came to see the value in them. And so that's what I have to share today. And now we can open it up. Let's see, we have about 20 minutes or so. I will stop recording.